All right, let's dive into a pretty counterintuitive idea today. What if your biggest setbacks, your worst failures, weren't actually accidents at all? What if they were part of a much bigger purpose? This whole concept comes from a really fascinating article in George Magazine, and honestly, it might just change the way you look at your own life's challenges.
So here's the core idea right out of the gate. The article suggests that some of our deepest setbacks aren't just bad luck. They're not mistakes. They're actually engineered, deliberately designed to sideline someone who's seen as a threat. And that leads us to the big question we're tackling here. What if that feeling of isolation, that so-called failure, what the article calls the pit, isn't the end of your road? What if it's actually a crucial part of your journey? To really get our heads around this, we first have to look at how these so-called failures are even constructed. And according to this article, it's a pattern as old as time, and it always kicks off with the exact same opening move. The perfect example they use to break this down is the biblical story of Joseph. Now, he wasn't cast out because he was wrong or reckless. Nope. He was removed because his vision, his truth, was a direct threat to his brother's control. You see, the first move to neutralize a threat isn't to argue with it, it's to silence it. And this is where the article connects the dots from the ancient world right to our own. The tactics, they haven't really changed. The tools are just different now. Whether it's Joseph being chucked into a pit or a modern-day figure getting canceled online, the goal is exactly the same. Isolate the voice so you can control the story. And here's the kicker. The hostility he faced wasn't because he was peddling lies. It was because he was speaking a truth they couldn't handle. So think about it. Sometimes being a target isn't a sign you're wrong. It's a sign that your truth is powerful. So how does this actually go down? How does someone go from being the favorite to being completely cast out? Well, the article really dissects the anatomy of this kind of portrayal. And it's a crazy paradox. The very thing that makes you special, that makes you stand out, is often the exact thing that puts a target on your back. Joseph had favor, right? Symbolized by that coat. But that favor didn't protect him. In fact, it's what kicked this whole thing off.
So, what do we even mean by favor in this context? It's not some kind of magic shield. It's more like a spotlight. It's the thing that makes you different from everyone else, and that distinction can stir up a whole lot of jealousy and resentment.
Now just let that sink in for a second. We tend to think that if we're right, if we've got the truth on our side, then we'll be okay. But this article argues the complete opposite. Having the right answer can actually make you the most vulnerable person in the room. And here's the really painful part. This kind of betrayal, it rarely comes from strangers. It comes from the people who are closest to us, our family, our friends, our colleagues. Why? Because they're the ones who really get how much influence we have, and they're the ones who feel most threatened by it. At the end of the day, you don't plot against someone who doesn't matter. Okay, so this is where the entire narrative just flips on its head. If being thrown into the pit is an engineered event, then what's its real purpose? This is where the whole idea of failure gets a massive reframe. I mean, from the outside looking in, it's easy to judge, right? You see someone in the pit and it just looks like they've lost. Their voice is gone, their influence has vanished, they've basically been erased. But that's just the optical illusion. Because on the inside, it's a totally different story. The pit isn't the end of the line, it's a layover. It's not a graveyard, it's a training ground. It's this period of forced transition that has a purpose you just can't see from the outside. You see, this is all about playing the long game. Power that's built on appearances and public opinion, that stuff is temporary. Real, lasting influence, that belongs to the people who can just endure the pit, survive the silence, and come back when they're truly needed. And think about that distinction. When you're in the pit, yeah, you lose the surface level stuff, your job title, your social media platform, your public image, but what you gain is so much more important. It's where your character gets forged in fire, away from the spotlight, preparing you for a kind of leadership that image alone could never, ever handle. So, if the pit is a preparation chamber, what gets you out? It's not someone saying sorry. It's not about them admitting they were wrong. The article argues it's something way more practical than that. It's pure necessity. And the whole process usually follows this clear four-step playbook. First, the truth teller gets silenced. But then, inevitably, a crisis hits. Maybe it's a famine, a market crash, a total system failure. All of a sudden, the old ways of doing things just aren't cutting it anymore. Competence, which used to be seen as a threat, now becomes the only thing that matters for survival. And that's the moment the person who is cast aside is called back to lead. And that's the cold, hard reality of it. Systems don't value integrity for its own sake. They value it when they have no other choice. Joseph wasn't pulled out of that prison because Pharaoh suddenly felt guilty. He was pulled out because a massive famine was on the horizon, and he was the only one who had a clue what to do. His competence became non-negotiable.
So let's pull all these threads together. What's the final outcome of this whole journey? Well, it's not about getting even. It's about fulfilling a plan that was always much, much bigger than the personal pain it caused.
When you look back, you see every single stage had a hidden purpose. The pit, that was actually protection from his brothers who wanted him gone. The prison, that was preparation, where he learned how to manage things. And the palace was all about positioning, putting him in the exact right place to save an entire nation. What looked like a personal tragedy was actually a national salvation plan.
And that's the ultimate twist in the story. The very person who was supposed to be buried, silenced, and forgotten becomes the one person everyone has to turn to for survival. What they tried to bury is now positioned to lead. And as that George Magazine article so powerfully illustrates, this isn't just some old story. It's a timeless lesson about power, about truth, and about purpose that is just as real today as it was thousands of years ago. So we'll end by turning this right back to you. If you feel like you're in a pit right now, maybe in your career, in your community, or just in your personal life, the lesson here is to maybe ask a different question. Is this really your downfall? Or could it be the uncomfortable, silent, but absolutely necessary start of your real purpose?